It's funny when you think about how much the Far Cry series has changed over the years. I mean, the original game had you as a mercenary sent to a mysterious island inhabited by soldiers and monkey mutants. Now with the release of Far Cry Primal, we're thrown back to 10,000 BC with a setting and premise that is about as far removed from the original game as I think is humanly possible. Yes, that's right, Far Cry Primal for the PC is finally here, 1 week after the release of the console versions for whatever reason, again developed by Ubisoft Montreal. So this time around you're a warrior named Takar, voiced by Adam Jensen, returning to his homeland of Oros to find his people, the Wenja, in a battle with two warring tribes, the Udam and the Izilia. The Udam are a tribe of cannibals hostile to the Wenja on sight, and the Izilia are a bunch of fire worshippers, again hostile to the Wenja and distinguishable by their blue body paint. As the story develops, both tribes' leaders serve as antagonists, and the eventual goal is to eradicate both of them. As you'd expect, the story is told through the first-person cinematics we're all so used to, which admittedly features some superb voice acting and animation. What I think is cool too is that there's not really any clear-cut bad guys, and even the so-called villains have a lot of depth. I think what also makes the cinematics unique is the language that the entire cast speak, with different dialects for each tribe. It's a pretty big gamble to have an entire game's voice acting done in a made-up language, but it does help to make the whole thing feel separated from the other games in the series, and hopefully not the kind of person who gets irritated by reading subtitles. After the short prologue where you're introduced to the basic mechanics of the game, you're then set free to rescue your people as you explore the land, building and upgrading your village and Takar himself to learn new abilities and increase in strength. There's a few unique Wenja that offer up their own upgrade trees, and all of their missions serve to progress the campaign. Some of these characters are actually really well written, likeable, and they have some pretty interesting backstories which you'll learn throughout the campaign, and then a couple of them are total arrow sponges and serve as mini boss fights before you can recruit them. But I won't say any more about the story because I know some people are hovering over their S key waiting to comment on how much I've spoiled the story, so I'll just leave it at that. Now I can't believe I'm saying this, but it seems that Far Cry Primal is actually a pretty well optimized game and it runs very smoothly on the highest settings. I have read that people playing early review codes say the performance is horrible, but with the day one patch it seems to be fixed and I had a smooth performance the entire time. On top of that, the land of Oros is gorgeous and stunning to behold. Geographically, it's split up between the north and the south, with warmer climates down the south and snowy climates in the north, forcing the player to manage their cold levels by staying close to heat sources. Later in the game, you can craft warm clothes to eliminate this threat entirely and explore to your frozen heart's content. Instead of climbing radio towers, you'll be taking over bonfires and enemy outposts, which simply requires you to light the bonfire or kill all of the enemies inhabiting the area, similar to how it worked in Far Cry 3 and 4. Getting an idea of your surroundings is now done through the use of Takar's Owl, which can tag enemies and also swoop them for an easy kill when upgraded. Now to be truthful, this whole bonfire and outpost mechanic isn't anything entirely new, and if you've played the last couple games then you know what you're in for. But really how Primal differs is that it has a much greater focus on the collecting of resources. Practically everything you come across in the game world can be put to good use, from wood, stone, clay and reeds, through to the resources you gain from hunting other animals for their meat, fat and hides. There's upgrades which speed up the process as well, like instead of getting one piece of wood, you'll get 5 or 6, and then again there's upgrades to lessen the amount of resources needed for crafting. So the more you play the game, the faster it eventually becomes, meaning it feels a lot less grindy. And all of this comes back to improving your village, which sadly you don't get all that much control over. There's no real point to the village outside of getting you upgrades. I mean, it would have been cool if you could customize the village and assign villagers to different tasks, but it all just goes on in the background without any real choices to make. Speaking of animals, in Far Cry Primal, they're absolutely abundant, almost to the point where it feels like there's almost too many of them at times. Faster animals like snow lions and jaguars have a tendency to take a few cheap potshots at you, then run off to avoid retaliation, which makes them really annoying when you're trying to explore at your own pace. Aside from the animals, you're frequently running into members of the Udam and the Izilia tribes, as well as other Wenja who just happen to be out for a stroll, and will happily lend a helping hand if you're in trouble. combat is split up between either ranged or melee, with a few different options here left up to the player. There's no guns or rocket launchers in this game, but you do get bows, spears, slingshots, and other sharp, pointy things to use against your enemies, all of which can be upgraded and improved. It's a real shame that the melee combat is so underwhelming. I mean, your main option is either a one or two-handed club, both of which just require you to kind of mash the attack button until something is dead. Having said that though, there is a heavy attack and the ability to throw your club, and it does feel mighty fun cracking someone's head like a goddamn walnut. But it would have been good if it was a bit more developed. I mean, a simple block or dodge move would have done the combat wonders. I found the bow and the spear to be the most satisfying in the long run. Eventually you'll unlock a longbow, which can kill most enemies in a single well-placed headshot, and even a double bow, which is self-explanatory. Then there's the spear, which will literally knock someone off their feet when you throw it through their chest. It's a real nice change of pace, and each of these weapons handles differently. After about the halfway mark, headshots become an absolute necessity, as most enemies are wearing body armor and can survive a bit of a beating. There's a few other gadgets as well, most of which I never spent much time with, like a berserker bomb that causes enemies to attack one another. There's another one that sends out a swarm of bees, oh no, not the bees, and a few other things you can throw at people, but after the initial novelty's worn off, you'll probably never use them. What I think is the coolest idea in the game is how you can tame animals to fight alongside you. Now, initially this is only wolves and mountain lions, but you can eventually tame bigger animals like bears and saber-toothed tigers. Saber-toothed tigers are also able to be ridden around, which serves as the vehicles of the game, I guess, allowing you to traverse areas much faster and also still use your weapons. Taming them is as simple as throwing out some meat, waiting for them to start eating it, then walking up and pressing the appropriate button. All of the animals have their own stats for speed, strength, and stealth, so you might not want to go sneaking into an outpost with a bear, for instance, or take on a pack of udon with a cheetah. If they're killed, it's as easy as opening up the menu and simply clicking on which tamed animal you want to spawn in. There are some issues with the pets though. I mean, they have a habit of running off and either attacking something or getting attacked themselves, often bringing back the heat to you, so if you're trying to stay undetected, just get rid of them entirely. They're an absolute headache. The other major issues I had with Far Cry Primal are few and far between. I'm still a bit irritated that the stealth system is pretty much the same it's ever been, with little improved. I still don't like it how when enemies are alerted, they somehow zero into your exact position, despite not possibly being able to know where the hell you are. I don't like the boss fights either, they're horrible, and there's no way someone should be able to survive 50 spears to the face. I could complain about the repetition of mechanics too, but that seems a little bit redundant. I mean, by this point, Ubisoft is almost its own genre, and you know what you're in for when you play these games. These are the type of typical open world type games with lots of things to do and limitless ways to go about doing them. After you've finished the campaign, which should probably roughly take anywhere from 10 to 15 hours, the retention time is largely going to depend on whether or not you've got the patience to finish all of the side tasks. At the end of the day, Far Cry Primal may not rock the gaming boat, so to speak, but it makes enough changes to the formula of the series, and the setting is unique enough that it just might hold your interest. And I mean, goddamn Sonny Jim, can you think of any other game that lets you ride around on the back of a saber-toothed tiger and brain someone with a slingshot?